Have you ever given 13 years of your life to someone who threw you away like yesterday's garbage, all because your body couldn't give him what he wanted? That's exactly what happened to Soo-Yeon on the night her entire world collapsed. She stood in the doorway of her own home, watching her husband of 13 years kiss another woman in the living room she had decorated with her own hands. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what she heard him say next. "She's barren, Jisoo. Completely useless. I've wasted 13 years waiting for something that will never happen. But you're going to give me the air I deserve." Soo-Yeon's hand flew to her mouth. Barren. The word cut through her like a blade heated by betrayal. For 13 years she had blamed herself. For 13 years she had endured the pitying looks from his mother, the whispered comments at family gatherings, the monthly disappointment that felt like a personal failure. She remembered every tear she had cried in private, hidden away in the bathroom while Tae-hyun slept peacefully in their bed. She remembered every fertility treatment that had ended in heartbreak, the hormones that made her sick, the procedures that left her bruised and sore, the constant cycle of hope and devastation that had slowly eroded her sense of self. She remembered every time she had apologized to Tae-hyun for something that was never within her control. Every time she had begged his forgiveness for the crime of having a body that wouldn't cooperate. And now, here was her husband, the man she had devoted her entire adult life to, calling her useless while his tongue was still wet from kissing his mistress. The woman in his arms was young, maybe 26, 27 at most. Beautiful in that sharp, calculating way that Soo-Yeon had never been, all angular cheekbones and artfully tousled hair, and lips painted a provocative red. Her name was Han Ji-soo, and Soo-Yeon recognized her immediately. She was the new marketing coordinator at her husband's company, the one who had started 6 months ago. The one Tae-hyun had mentioned was finally bringing some fresh energy to the office. Fresh energy. Is that what they were calling it now? Soo-Yeon thought back to the first time she had heard Jisoo's name. It had been at dinner 3 months ago, in this very room. She had cooked Tae-hyun's favorite meal, galbi jjim that had taken her 6 hours to prepare, and he had barely touched it, too busy scrolling through his phone and talking about work. But when he mentioned Jisoo, his voice had changed, become animated. His eyes had lit up in a way Soo-Yeon hadn't seen in years. "Jisoo came up with the whole concept," he had said, gesturing enthusiastically with his chopsticks. "She's remarkable, really innovative. The team loves her." He had glanced up at Soo-Yeon then, and something in his expression had made her uneasy. A flicker of comparison, of judgment. She's going places, that one. Soo-Yeon had felt a warning bell ring somewhere deep in her subconscious, but she had pushed it aside. She had trusted her husband. After 13 years of marriage, she had believed that trust was earned, that their history together meant something, that the vows they had spoken, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, were more than just pretty words. How foolish she had been. How painfully, devastatingly foolish. Jisoo pulled back from the kiss and smiled up at Tae-hyun with the confidence of a woman who already knew she had won. Her lipstick was smeared slightly, a crimson stain at the corner of her mouth like a badge of conquest. There was a smugness in her expression that made Soo-Yeon's stomach turn, the look of someone who had taken what she wanted without a shred of remorse. "When are you going to tell her?" Jisoo asked, her voice carrying clearly through the apartment. "I'm tired of hiding. I want to be able to walk into your house without feeling like a thief." "Soon," Tae-hyun promised, stroking her hair with a tenderness that made Soo-Yeon's heart crack. He had never touched Soo-Yeon like that. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. When had his hands become so gentle? When had his voice become so soft? Had he been saving all his warmth for this woman while giving his wife nothing but cold indifference? "I've already spoken to my lawyer," he continued. "Once the divorce is finalized, you'll be the one standing beside me. You'll be Mrs. Park, the position you deserve. And the baby? Jisoo placed her hand on her still flat stomach, a gesture that was clearly rehearsed. She had probably practiced it in the mirror, perfecting the angle, the pressure of her fingers, the way it drew attention to her fertility, while simultaneously highlighting Soo-Yeon's failure. I want our child to have your name from the very beginning. No complications, no questions about legitimacy. Baby. Soo-Yeon felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Her vision blurred at the edges, and for a moment she thought she might faint. The word echoed in her skull like a death knell. Baby. 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 This woman was pregnant. Pregnant with her husband's child. The child that Soo-Yeon had prayed for, cried for, undergone countless painful treatments for, and this woman had simply taken it, stolen everything in one fell swoop. She thought about all the nights she had lain awake, wondering what was wrong with her, counting the days of her cycle, monitoring her temperature, scheduling intimacy around ovulation windows until sex became a clinical procedure rather than an act of love. She thought about the doctor's appointments where she had been poked and prodded like a lab specimen, her body reduced to a collection of hormones and follicles and uterine measurements. She thought about the medications that had made her nauseous and bloated and emotional, the injections she had given herself in the bathroom while tears streamed down her face, the procedures that had left her exhausted and sore and hopeful, always hopeful, despite the mountain of evidence that hope was futile. She thought about the way Tae-hyun had gradually stopped touching her, the way he had started working later and later, coming home after she was already asleep, the way he had stopped looking at her, stopped seeing her, stopped treating her as anything more than a defective machine that couldn't perform its most basic function. And now this woman, this 26-year-old marketing coordinator with her perfect makeup and her predatory smile, was carrying the child that should have been Soo-Yeon's. Something inside Soo-Yeon cracked. Not broke. Cracked. There's a difference. When something breaks, it shatters into a million pieces, scattering beyond repair, never to be whole again. When something cracks, it creates an opening, a fissure, a space for something new to grow. And in that moment, standing in the shadow of her own doorway, watching her husband plan his future with another woman, Soo-Yeon felt something cold and hard begin to form in the crack of her broken heart. It wasn't hatred. Not exactly. It was something more powerful than hatred. It was clarity. The sudden, devastating clarity of seeing the truth that had been hidden in plain sight for years. She stepped into the light. "Congratulations," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I hope your baby inherits her mother's ambition. It seems to be working quite well for her." The reaction was instantaneous and almost comical. Jisoo screamed and leaped away from Tae-hyun as if she'd been burned. Her heel caught on the edge of the coffee table. The coffee table Soo-Yeon had picked out 5 years ago. The one she had insisted on despite Tae-hyun's complaints about the price. And she stumbled backward, nearly falling. Her perfectly composed face contorted into something ugly, something terrified. For a moment the mask slipped, and Soo-Yeon saw the true Jisoo underneath. Not a confident seductress, but a desperate opportunist caught in the act. Tae-hyun's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, guilt, anger, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. As if he was glad the secret was finally out. As if keeping it had been a burden he was happy to shed. "Soo-Yeon." He said her name like it was an inconvenience, like she was an unexpected interruption in his otherwise perfect evening. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to learn that I'm useless and barren." She walked into the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor she had paid for with her own salary all those years ago, back when she still had a career, back when she still had dreams. Each step felt deliberate, purposeful, like she was walking toward something rather than away from it. "Long enough to hear about your baby, your heir." She turned to look at Jisoo, who was trying to hide behind Tae-hyun's shoulder, like a child caught stealing cookies. "Congratulations, by the way. I hope motherhood treats you better than it treated me." Soo-Yeon, listen, Taehyun started, reaching toward her with the hand that had just been caressing another woman's hair. No. The word came out sharp and final, like a door slamming shut. Like the sound of a 13-year marriage dying its long overdue death. I've been listening for 13 years. I've been understanding for 13 years. Every time you worked late, I understood. Every time you forgot our anniversary, I understood. Every time you looked at me with disappointment because my body couldn't do what you needed it to do, I understood. Her voice was rising now, 13 years of suppressed emotion breaking through the cracks. I've been patient and supportive and endlessly, pathetically hopeful for 13 years. I think it's time I stopped listening. She walked past them both and headed for the stairs. Behind her, she could hear Taehyun's footsteps following, heavy and urgent. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "To pack." "Pack? Soo-Yeon, we need to talk about this like adults." She stopped on the third stair and turned to face him. From this angle, she was looking down at him for the first time in their entire marriage. It felt appropriate. For 13 years, she had looked up to him, literally and figuratively. She had made herself small, so he could feel big. She had dimmed her light, so his could shine brighter. She had twisted herself into whatever shape he needed, bending and contorting until she no longer recognized herself in the mirror. Not anymore. "You want to talk like adults? Fine. Let's talk." She descended one step, her eyes never leaving his. "You've been sleeping with your marketing coordinator for at least 6 months. You've gotten her pregnant. You've already consulted a divorce lawyer. You've been calling me barren behind my back while smiling at me across the breakfast table every morning." Another step. What exactly is there to talk about? Taehyun's jaw tightened. She could see the moment he decided to stop pretending. The mask of the concerned husband fell away, revealing the cold, calculating businessman underneath, the man he must have always been, hidden beneath a veneer of charm that had fooled her for over a decade. "I wanted to tell you in a civilized manner. I was going to explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me for half a year. That every time you said you were working late, you were actually with her? That every time I asked if something was wrong and you said nothing, you were planning your escape route? That every time I tried to touch you and you pulled away, claiming you were tired, you were actually saving your energy for someone else?" Soo-Yeon laughed, but there was no humor in it, only 13 years of accumulated pain, finally finding its voice. "I don't need an explanation, Taehyun. I need a divorce." The word hung in the air between them. Divorce. After 13 years, it felt both impossible and inevitable. Like a storm that had been building on the horizon for years, finally making landfall. "Fine." Taehyun's voice hardened. All pretense of remorse vanished from his face, replaced by something cold and calculating. The transformation was almost instantaneous, like watching a snake shed its skin to reveal the predator underneath. "If that's what you want, fine. But don't expect me to be generous. You brought nothing into this marriage except your pretty face, and that's long since faded. The apartment is in my name. The car is in my name. Everything we built together. I built." "Everything we built?" Soo-Yeon's voice rose for the first time, echoing off the walls of the apartment she had made into a home. "I worked full-time for the first 8 years of our marriage. I paid half the mortgage on this apartment while you were still a junior associate. I supported your career while mine stagnated because you needed someone at home to manage your social calendar and attend your company dinners and smile at your boss's wives. I gave up my dreams so you could chase yours. Don't you dare tell me I brought nothing into this marriage. Your contributions were minimal at best." Taehyun waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "And frankly, if you had been able to fulfill your most basic function as a wife—" "My basic function?" Soo-Yeon descended the final stair until they were face to face, close enough to see the tiny vein pulsing in his temple, close enough to smell Jisoo's perfume still lingering on his collar. You mean producing an heir? Like I'm some kind of breeding stock? Like my only value is in my ability to reproduce? You know what I mean. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. The man she had married had been handsome, charming, full of promise. The man standing before her now was a stranger. A cold, cruel stranger who had systematically dismantled her sense of self over 13 years. Had he always been this way? And she had simply been too blinded by love to see it? Had she spent 13 years married to a monster, convincing herself he was a prince? "I'll have my things out by morning," she said finally. Her voice was steady now, devoid of the anger that had briefly flared. What was the point of anger? It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't restore the 13 years she had lost. It wouldn't give her back the career she had sacrificed, the dreams she had abandoned, the person she might have become if she had never met Park Tae-hyun. She walked past him and up the stairs. This time he didn't follow. It took Soo-Yeon 3 hours to pack 13 years of marriage into 4 suitcases. She was methodical about it, moving through the apartment like a ghost, touching the objects that had once meant something, and finding them hollow. She took her clothes, her books, the jewelry her mother had left her before she died, the few photos she couldn't bear to leave behind, pictures from before her marriage, when her smile had been genuine and her eyes had been bright. She left everything that reminded her of Tae-hyun. The silk scarf he'd given her for their 10th anniversary, chosen by his secretary, she now suspected. The pearl earrings from their trip to Japan, a trip where he had spent more time on his phone than with her. The wedding album that now felt like a record of a crime rather than a celebration. As she packed, she thought about the woman she had been when she first met Tae-hyun. 24 years old, fresh out of university with a degree in fashion design and a minor in business. She had been full of dreams back then. Dreams of starting her own clothing line, of making a name for herself in the competitive world of Korean fashion. She had been ambitious, creative, burning with the fire of youth and possibility. And then she had fallen in love. Tae-hyun had been charming then, attentive. He had made her feel like the most important person in the world. He had supported her dreams, encouraged her ambitions, told her she could do anything she set her mind to. And then, slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, he had begun to chip away at those dreams. A comment here about how fashion was a risky industry. A suggestion there that maybe she should focus on something more stable. A promotion at his company that required them to move to a new city, far away from her professional contacts. A pregnancy attempt that demanded all her time and energy, leaving nothing for her career. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. She was no longer Choi Soo-Yeon, aspiring fashion designer. She was Mrs. Park Tae-hyun, dutiful wife, failed mother, invisible woman. Well, not anymore. At 2 a.m, she called for a taxi. Tae-hyun and Jisoo had retreated to the guest bedroom, the bedroom where Soo-Yeon had once imagined putting a nursery, with walls painted soft yellow and a mobile hanging from the ceiling. And she could hear them talking in low voices behind the closed door, planning their future, the future that had been stolen from her. She thought about knocking on that door, about confronting them one more time, about screaming and crying and demanding answers that wouldn't change anything. But what was the point? She had already said everything that needed to be said. Anything more would just be theater. The taxi driver helped her load her suitcases into the trunk. He was an older man with kind eyes and weathered hands that spoke of decades of hard work. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer platitudes, didn't try to fill the silence with meaningless chatter. He simply helped her, then opened the door and waited. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. Soo-Yeon gave him the address of a hotel near the Gangnam business district. She had enough in her personal savings to cover a week or 2 while she figured out her next move. After that, she would have to find a job, start over, build a new life from the ashes of the old one. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Soo-Yeon allowed herself one final look at the apartment building. 13 years of memories. 13 years of hopes and dreams and disappointments. 13 years of loving a man who had never deserved her. The lights in the guest bedroom were still on. She could see the shadows moving behind the curtains. 2 people, building their future on the ruins of her past. She turned away and faced forward. The lights of Seoul blurred past the window as the taxi carried her toward an uncertain future. The city was still alive at this hour. Neon signs flickering, late-night restaurants glowing warmly, couples walking hand in hand down sidewalks wet with recent rain. The world continued to turn, indifferent to her pain. But for the first time in years, Soo-Yeon felt something other than defeat. It was small, flickering, barely there, but it was undeniably hope. She didn't look back again. The hotel room was small but clean. Just a bed, a desk, a bathroom the size of a closet. Soo-Yeon sat on the edge of the bed at 3 a.m, staring at her phone. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating a contact list that had shrunk to almost nothing over the years. She had exactly 4 contacts she could call. Her mother, who had been dead for 3 years. Her father, who had remarried and moved to Busan and rarely remembered she existed. Her older sister, who was dealing with her own failing marriage. And her best friend from college, Min-hee, who had moved to the United States 5 years ago. 13 years ago, this list had been long, full of friends and colleagues and acquaintances, people she had met through work, through hobbies, through the simple act of living an independent life. But one by one, they had faded away. Social obligations to Taehyun's circle had replaced her own friendships. Corporate events had consumed her weekends, and slowly, without her even noticing, her world had shrunk until it contained only one person. A person who had just thrown her away. She was completely alone. The realization should have devastated her. Instead, it felt strangely liberating. For 13 years, her entire identity had been wrapped up in being Taehyun's wife. Now that identity had been stripped away, and what remained was nothing. A blank slate, an empty canvas waiting to be painted. She thought about calling Min-hee. It would be afternoon in Los Angeles, and her friend would pick up on the first ring, ready to offer comfort and outrage in equal measure. Min-hee had never liked Taehyun. "He's too smooth," she had said at the wedding reception, slightly drunk on champagne. Men that smooth are always hiding something. Soo-Yeon had laughed it off at the time. Now she wondered what else Min-hee had seen that she had been too blind to notice. But what would Soo-Yeon say? That her husband had been cheating on her? That her marriage was over? That she was sitting in a hotel room at 3 a.m. with no job, no home, and no idea what to do next? No. She wasn't ready for that conversation yet. She needed to process what had happened before she could talk about it. Instead, Soo-Yeon opened her laptop and began searching for job listings. The next 3 weeks were a blur of interviews, rejections, and endless cups of convenience store coffee. Soo-Yeon discovered very quickly that the job market was not kind to 37-year-old women with 5-year gaps in their resume. "I'm sorry, but we're looking for someone with more recent experience," became a refrain she heard so often it started to sound like a broken record. She heard it at fashion companies, at retail stores, at corporate offices. She heard it from HR managers her age, from hiring directors half her age, from automated email systems that couldn't even be bothered to personalize the rejection. Or worse, "You're overqualified for this position." As if being too skilled was somehow a liability, as if experience and expertise were burdens rather than assets. She applied for everything: administrative assistant positions, retail jobs, customer service roles. She even applied for a barista position at a coffee shop, only to be told she was too senior for the role. Too senior, at 37. as if her age and experience were diseases rather than qualifications. Meanwhile, Taehyun's lawyer sent her the divorce papers. They arrived in a manila envelope, impersonal and official, as if the ending of a 13-year marriage could be reduced to a stack of legal documents. The terms were brutal. He wanted to keep the apartment, the car, the investment accounts, everything. He was offering her a pittance of a settlement, barely enough to cover 6 months of rent, and claiming that her contributions to the marriage were non-monetary and therefore not subject to equitable distribution. Soo-Yeon read the documents 3 times, each time feeling a fresh wave of outrage. Non-monetary contributions, as if the 8 years she had worked to help pay off their mortgage meant nothing. As if the 5 years she had spent supporting his career, managing their household, attending endless corporate events as his dutiful wife, none of it counted. As if her sacrifice, her devotion, her years of service could be reduced to 0 with the stroke of a lawyer's pen. "You can fight this," her lawyer told her. He was a sympathetic man in his 50s, recommended by her sister, who had used him for her own divorce proceedings. His office was small and cluttered, but his eyes were kind. "You have a strong case for spousal support, at minimum. 13 years of marriage, significant career sacrifice on your part, evidence of his infidelity. Any judge would rule in your favor." "How long would the fight take?" "A year, maybe 2. These things drag on, especially when substantial assets are involved. He'll appeal, delay, file motions. It's exhausting, but winnable. A year or 2 of being tied to Taehyun, of seeing his name on legal documents every week, of being reminded every day of the man who had betrayed her, of watching him live his new life with his new wife and his new baby while she was stuck in legal limbo, unable to fully move on." "I'll sign," Soo-Yeon said. "I want this over with." Her lawyer looked at her with something between pity and respect. "Are you sure? You're entitled to much more than what he's offering. Fighting would mean—" "I'm sure." She picked up the pen and flipped to the signature page. "Money can be earned again. Time can't. And I refuse to spend another minute of my life fighting over the scraps of a marriage that died years ago." She signed the papers that afternoon. By the end of the week, her 13-year marriage was officially dissolved. She was no longer Mrs. Park. She was just Soo-Yeon, alone, nearly broke, starting over at 37. And then, just when things seemed darkest, she got a phone call that changed everything. "Ms. Choi Soo-Yeon?" The voice on the other end was crisp and professional, the kind of voice trained to convey efficiency and authority. "This is the office of Han Jun-ho, CEO of Zenith Industries. Mr. Han would like to schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience." Soo-Yeon blinked at her phone, certain she had misheard. Zenith Industries was one of the largest conglomerates in South Korea, with interests in technology, manufacturing, real estate, and about a dozen other sectors. Their headquarters was a gleaming tower in the heart of Seoul, and their CEO was legendary, a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from nothing, and was known for his cold demeanor and brilliant business acumen. His face was on the covers of magazines. His name was spoken in boardrooms across Asia, with a mixture of fear and respect. Why would someone like that want to meet with her? "I think there must be some mistake," she said. "I didn't apply for a position at Zenith." "There's no mistake, Ms. Choi. Mr. Han was quite specific. He asked for you by name." By name. How did a man like Han Jun-ho even know her name? She hadn't worked in the corporate world for 5 years. She had no connections to his industry. The only possible point of intersection was... Her mind raced back 13 years. Before she married Taehyun. Before she gave up her dreams. Before she became invisible. She had worked in HR at Park Investment Group, her first job out of college. A stepping stone, she had thought, before she launched her fashion career. And she remembered dimly a young man who had come in for an interview. Bright eyes, patched jacket, a hunger in his face that reminded her of herself. He had been rejected, told he didn't have the right pedigree, the right connections, the right background. But something about him had made Soo-Yeon pause. Something about the fire in his eyes, the determination in his jaw, the way he refused to flinch even when the senior partner dismissed him with barely concealed contempt. Could it be? "When would Mr. Han like to meet?" she asked, her heart suddenly racing. "Tomorrow morning at 9, if you're available. I'll send a car to pick you up." A car. To pick her up. For a meeting with a billionaire CEO who had somehow learned her name and wanted to see her specifically. Nothing about this made sense. But Soo-Yeon had learned something in the weeks since her divorce. When life offers you an unexpected door, you walk through it. Even if you have no idea what's waiting on the other side. "I'll be ready," she said. The Zenith Industries headquarters was a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the Seoul skyline. Soo-Yeon had walked past it countless times over the years, never imagining that one day she would be escorted through its marble lobby and up to the executive floor in a private elevator. The elevator was lined with mirrors, and Soo-Yeon caught a glimpse of herself as it rose. She had dressed carefully. Her best suit, simple but elegant, paired with the one pair of designer shoes she hadn't sold in her post-divorce purge. Her hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and her makeup was minimal but professional. She looked, she thought, like a woman who had her life together. It was a useful illusion. The assistant who greeted her on the executive floor was impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, with not a hair out of place. "Mr. Han will see you now, Ms. Choi. Through those doors." The doors in question were solid mahogany, at least 8 feet tall, with brass handles that gleamed in the morning light. They were the kind of doors designed to intimidate visitors, to remind them that they were entering the domain of someone important. Soo-Yeon straightened her jacket, took a deep breath, and pushed them open. The office beyond was enormous, at least 3 times the size of her hotel room, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Seoul spread out below like a miniature world, the Han River glittering in the morning sun, the mountains green in the distance, the endless sprawl of buildings and roads and bridges that made up one of Asia's greatest cities. The furniture was minimal, but clearly expensive. A massive desk of dark wood that probably cost more than a car, a sitting area with leather chairs arranged around a low table, and a wall of books that looked like they had actually been read. Dog-eared and annotated, not just decoration. There was art on the walls, original pieces, not prints, and a subtle fragrance in the air that spoke of wealth without being ostentatious. But Soo-Yeon barely noticed any of it. Her attention was fixed on the man standing by the window. Han Jun-ho was younger than she had expected, in his early 40s perhaps, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see everything. His jaw was strong, his posture perfect, and he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove to anyone, the kind of confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from absolute certainty in one's own abilities. He was also staring at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Ms. Choi." He didn't smile. His voice was deep and measured, each word precisely placed. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Han." She stepped forward, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "I have to admit, I'm confused about why I'm here. I didn't apply for any position at Zenith." "You're not here for a position." He gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Please sit." She sat. He remained standing, studying her from his position by the window. The morning light cast half his face in shadow, making his expression impossible to read. He was, she realized, deliberately positioning himself to have the advantage, the light behind him, obscuring his features, while she sat fully illuminated in her chair. A power move. She had seen enough corporate executives to recognize one. 13 years ago, he said, I was a nobody, a recent graduate with a business degree and a dream. I had nothing. No connections, no family name, no money. Just ambition and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. He paused, and something flickered in his eyes. I applied for a junior analyst position at Park Investment Group, your husband's family company. Former husband, Soo-Yeon almost corrected him, but she stayed silent, sensing that something important was coming. I was rejected, he continued, told I didn't have the right background, the right connections, the right... He paused, and for a moment, the mask of professional distance slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Old wounds, still festering. The right pedigree. The interview panel looked at my resume, saw that I was from Incheon, that my mother was a factory worker, that I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through university, and they decided I wasn't worth their time. Soo-Yeon remembered. The memory surfaced like a bubble rising through water. The young man with fire in his eyes and patches on his jacket. The dismissive sneer on the senior partner's face. The way she had felt a flash of anger on behalf of this stranger who was being judged not on his potential, but on his circumstances. I was shown the door, Junho said. But before I left, I was stopped in the hallway by a young woman in the HR department. She gave me a business card for a startup that was looking for hungry young analysts. She said. He paused, and his voice softened almost imperceptibly. She said she could tell I had potential, even if her superiors couldn't see it. The business card. Soo-Yeon had almost forgotten about it. It had been a small gesture, an impulse born of sympathy, and a rebellious streak she had never fully suppressed. She had gotten that business card from a friend at a networking event weeks earlier. It had been for a tiny company, barely more than an idea, struggling to find its footing in the competitive Seoul business scene. She had held onto it because something about it had felt promising, full of potential, even if no one else could see it. Just like the young man with fire in his eyes. That startup was Zenith's predecessor, Han Junho said. I joined as their 3rd employee. Within 5 years, I was running the company. Within 10, I had built it into what it is today. He finally moved from the window and sat in the chair across from her. The opportunity you gave me that day set me on the path to everything I've built since. Soo-Yeon stared at him. This man, this billionaire, this titan of industry, was telling her that she had changed his life, with a business card. With a moment of kindness, she had almost forgotten. I've been trying to find you for years, he said, to thank you. But you disappeared into your marriage, and Park Tae-hyun made sure to erase any trace of the woman you were before you became his wife. Your professional connections, your industry contacts, even your social media presence, all of it gone. As if Choi Soo-Yeon had ceased to exist. You remembered me. Soo-Yeon's voice was barely above a whisper. After all this time, I remember everyone who believed in me when I was nothing. His gaze was unwavering, intense. There weren't many. My mother, my thesis advisor, and you, a stranger in a hallway who saw something in me that no one else could see. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Soo-Yeon felt something shift in the air between them, some invisible barrier dissolving. This man, this powerful billionaire CEO, was looking at her not as a failed wife or a pitiful divorcee, but as the woman who had changed his life with a single act of kindness. "What do you want from me, Mr. Han?" she asked. "I want to repay my debt." He leaned forward slightly. "I know about your divorce. I know about the settlement your husband forced you to accept. And I know that you're currently unemployed and running out of savings." She flushed with embarrassment. "You've been investigating me. I've been keeping track of you. There's a difference." He paused. "When I learned you were finally free of your marriage, I knew it was time to reach out. I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" Zenith is launching a new subsidiary focused on sustainable fashion, an area I know very little about but that you studied extensively in university. I need someone to lead that division. Someone with vision, integrity, and the ability to build something from nothing. Soo-Yeon's heart was racing. Fashion. Her first love. The dream she had abandoned 13 years ago in favor of being a good wife. The passion that had been slowly strangled out of her by years of dismissal and neglect. Mr. Han, I haven't worked in fashion in over a decade. I'm not qualified. You're exactly qualified. His tone brooked no argument. You have a degree in fashion design, a minor in business administration, and 8 years of experience in corporate environments before you stepped away. More importantly, you have something that can't be taught. The ability to see potential in people and ideas that others dismiss. You saw it in me. I'm betting you can see it in this industry as well. That was one business card, one time, 13 years ago. That one business card changed the trajectory of my entire life. He stood and walked to his desk, picking up a folder and bringing it back to her. The salary is generous. The benefits are comprehensive. You'll have full autonomy to build the team and set the direction. All I ask is that you give it 1 year. If it doesn't work out, I'll provide a glowing reference and help you find something else. Soo-Yeon opened the folder and nearly choked when she saw the salary figure. It was 5 times what she had been making before she quit to support Taehyun's career. 5 times. More money than she had ever dreamed of earning. This is too much, she managed. It's appropriate for a division head at Zenith Industries. He returned to his chair. Do you need time to consider? Did she? Here was an opportunity dropping into her lap like a gift from the universe. A chance to rebuild her career, regain her independence, prove to herself and everyone else that she was more than just the barren wife Taehyun had thrown away. But something nagged at her. A suspicion she couldn't quite name. Mr. Han, she said slowly. Why now? You said you've been trying to find me for years. Why approach me at this specific moment? His expression flickered, just for an instant, before the mask of professionalism returned. I heard about your divorce. It seemed like the right time. That's not an answer. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the sharp edges and making him look almost human, almost warm. For a moment, she saw not the powerful CEO, but the young man with patches on his jacket, the one who had looked at her with such desperate hope all those years ago. You're as perceptive as I remembered, he said. The truth is, I've been monitoring Park Taehyun's company for some time. Not because of you, because of business opportunities. When I learned what he was doing to you, I accelerated my timeline. Accelerated your timeline for what? For destroying him. The words hung in the air between them. Destroying him. This wasn't just about repaying a debt. This was about revenge. I don't understand, Soo-Yeon said. Park Taehyun's company has been engaging in fraudulent accounting practices for at least 3 years, Han Junho explained. His voice was cold now, clinical. I have evidence that could bring the entire organization crashing down. I've been gathering it slowly, waiting for the right moment to strike. He paused. When I learned that he was divorcing you to marry his pregnant mistress, I decided the right moment was now. Soo-Yeon's mind was reeling. Fraud, evidence, destruction. Her quiet divorce had somehow become entangled in a corporate war she knew nothing about. You want to use me. I want to help you. The fact that it also helps me destroy a man I've despised for 13 years is merely a bonus. He stood and walked to the window again, his back to her. Taehyun's father rejected me because I wasn't good enough. His son threw away the woman who believed in me because she couldn't give him an heir. The Park family has operated under the assumption that they can treat people as disposable commodities. I intend to prove them wrong. And what happens to me in your plan? He turned back to face her. You rise. You build something extraordinary. And when Taehyun's world comes crashing down, you're standing at the top of an empire of your own. Not because I put you there, because you put yourself there. I'm just opening the door. What you do once you walk through it is entirely up to you. Soo-Yeon looked down at the folder in her hands. The salary, the opportunity, the chance to rebuild everything she had lost, and more. And yes, the prospect of watching Taehyun's face when he realized the woman he had called useless was now more successful than he could ever dream of being. It was tempting. More than tempting. If I do this, she said slowly, it's on my terms. I'm not a pawn in your vendetta against the Park family. Agreed. And I don't want to know the details of whatever you're planning against Taehyun. If his company falls, it falls because of his own choices, not because of anything I did. Also agreed. Then, she took a deep breath. When do I start? For the second time that morning, Han Junho smiled. How does Monday sound? The next 6 months were the hardest and most exhilarating of Soo-Yeon's life. She threw herself into building Zenith's sustainable fashion division with an intensity that surprised even herself. She was the first one in the office every morning, and the last one out at night. She hired a team of young, hungry designers who shared her vision. She negotiated partnerships with eco-friendly suppliers across Asia. She developed a brand identity that was elegant, ethical, and utterly distinct from anything else on the market. The work was grueling. 18-hour days, working lunches, weekends spent reviewing spreadsheets and approving designs. There were setbacks. A supplier who failed to deliver, a design that tested poorly, a marketing campaign that fell flat. But for the first time in 13 years, Soo-Yeon felt alive. She was creating something, building something, using all the skills and talents that had lain dormant for so long. And somewhere along the way, she started to remember who she had been before she became Mrs. Park. She had been ambitious, driven, creative, talented. All the qualities that Taehyun had slowly, systematically crushed out of her over 13 years of marriage. Now they were coming back, like flowers blooming after a long winter. She discovered that she still had ideas, still had vision, still had the ability to inspire others. She discovered that the woman she had been at 24 hadn't died. She had just been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. She also found herself spending more and more time with Han Junho. It started professionally, weekly update meetings, strategy sessions, working dinners. He was demanding but fair, expecting excellence, but also providing the resources and support to achieve it. He challenged her ideas, pushed back on her proposals, forced her to defend every decision. And in doing so, he made her better, sharper, more confident. But gradually the conversations began to drift beyond business. He told her about his childhood in a poor neighborhood of Incheon, about the mother who had worked 3 jobs to put him through school, about the fire that had driven him to succeed where everyone expected him to fail. She told him about her dreams of being a fashion designer, about her mother's early death, about the loneliness of a marriage that had looked perfect from the outside, but felt like a prison from within. They understood each other. In a way, she had never understood Taehyun, and he had certainly never understood her. "You're different now," Junho said one evening, as they stood on the rooftop terrace of the Zenith building, watching the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of stars. "From when I first met you." "Different how?" "You stand straighter. You speak louder. You take up more space." He turned to look at her, his eyes intense in the dim light. "You've stopped apologizing for existing." Soo-Yeon laughed softly. "I didn't realize I was doing that before." "You were. Every time I saw you at company events with Taehyun, you made yourself small, like you were trying to disappear into his shadow. His voice hardened. He did that to you. Trained you to believe you were less than you are. Maybe. She looked out at the city, at the lights flickering in thousands of windows, at the cars crawling along distant highways, at the endless pulse of life that was Seoul at night. But I'm done being small now. I know. He moved closer, until they were standing shoulder to shoulder. That's what I admire most about you. Not just that you survived. Anyone can survive. But you came out of it stronger, better, more yourself. If you're rooting for Soo-Yeon as much as I am, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Now, let's see what happens next. Soo-Yeon turned to face him. In the soft glow of the city lights, his features looked less stern than usual, more vulnerable. For a moment, she saw not the powerful CEO, but the young man with patches on his jacket, the one who had looked at her with such desperate hope all those years ago. Junho, she said. It was the first time she had used his given name without the formal honorific. What is this? Between us? He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, uncertain in a way she had never heard before. I don't know. I've spent so long focused on building my empire, destroying my enemies, proving everyone wrong. I don't know how to do this. He gestured between them. Whatever this is. Neither do I. My marriage wasn't exactly a masterclass in healthy relationships. Then maybe we figure it out together. He reached out and took her hand, tentatively, like he was asking permission. Slowly, carefully, without expectations. Her fingers curled around his. His palm was warm, his grip gentle but sure. It felt right. It felt like something she hadn't known she was missing until this moment. I think I can do that, she said. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Seoul flicker below them. Two broken people, slowly learning to be whole again. News of Han Junho and Choi Soo-Yeon's relationship spread through high society like wildfire. The powerful CEO, known for his cold demeanor and alleged inability to feel human emotions, seen having dinner with a divorced woman 7 years his senior. The gossip columnists had a field day. Soo-Yeon tried to ignore the whispers, but they followed her everywhere. At industry events, she could feel the stares. At business meetings, she caught the sideways glances. And on social media, the comments ranged from merely catty to outright cruel. She's clearly a gold digger. He could do so much better. Isn't she the one whose husband left her because she's barren? No wonder she went after a billionaire instead. But through it all, Junho never wavered. When reporters ambushed them outside a restaurant, he put his arm around her waist and told them, Ms. Choi is one of the most talented and dedicated professionals I've ever had the privilege of working with. Our personal relationship is none of your business. When a tabloid published old photos of Soo-Yeon looking tired and worn down during her marriage, he bought the publication and fired the editor. You didn't have to do that, Soo-Yeon said when she heard. I didn't have to. I wanted to. His eyes were cold, in a way she had learned, meant he was suppressing fury. No one disrespects you. Not anymore. Not while I'm breathing. It should have felt overwhelming, this fierce protectiveness from a man she had known for less than a year. Instead, it felt like coming home. 8 months after their first meeting, Soo-Yeon's sustainable fashion line launched to critical acclaim. The reviews were glowing, visionary, game-changing, the future of fashion. The sales exceeded all projections, and Soo-Yeon found herself on the cover of Korea's most prestigious business magazine, hailed as the visionary behind fashion's ethical revolution. She kept a copy of that magazine in her desk drawer. Sometimes when doubt crept in, she would pull it out and remind herself of how far she had come. The woman on that cover, confident, successful, radiant, seemed like a stranger compared to the broken woman who had stood in a hotel room at 3 a.m, wondering how her life had fallen apart. And then, on the day of her biggest triumph. Her past came crashing back into her life. The launch party for Zenith Fashion was held at one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels. 500 guests, including the biggest names in fashion, business, and media. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Champagne flowed freely. And Soo-Yeon wore a dress of her own design, a flowing emerald gown made entirely from recycled materials, and stood at the center of it all, finally in a spotlight she had earned. She was in the middle of a conversation with a Japanese buyer when she felt a hand on her arm. Junho's assistant, looking pale. "Ms. Choi, there's a situation. Park Tae-hyun is here. He's making a scene at the entrance." Soo-Yeon's heart stuttered. "What?" "Security is trying to remove him, but he's insisting on speaking to you. He says it's urgent." Soo-Yeon exchanged a glance with Junho, who had appeared at her side the moment he sensed something was wrong. His jaw was tight, and she could see the barely contained fury in his eyes. "I can have him removed," he said quietly. "You don't have to see him." "No." Soo-Yeon straightened her spine. "I'll handle this." She walked through the crowd toward the entrance, aware that every eye in the room was following her. The whispers started immediately. "That's her ex-husband, isn't it? I heard he's in some kind of trouble. This is going to be good." And Soo-Yeon forced herself to ignore them all. By the time she reached the lobby, the whispers had reached a fever pitch. Tae-hyun was standing by the security desk, looking nothing like the polished, confident man she had married. His suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. His hair was disheveled, with streaks of gray she had never noticed before. And there was a desperation in his eyes that she had never seen, the look of a man watching his world crumble around him. "Soo-Yeon," he lurched toward her. "I need to talk to you, please." "You lost the right to demand my time when you called me barren and useless." Her voice was ice. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it to my lawyer. It's not about the divorce. It's about—" He swallowed hard. "Jisoo, she lied to me." "Lied about what?" "The baby. There was never any baby." His voice cracked. "She faked the pregnancy tests. She faked everything. By the time I found out, it was too late. You were gone, and I was—" He ran a hand through his hair. "She was sleeping with my business partner. They've been planning to take over my company for months. Everything I built, everything my father built, it's all falling apart." Soo-Yeon felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction, pity, and something that might have been vindication. The woman Tae-hyun had thrown her away for had turned out to be exactly what she had always appeared to be: a snake. "And you came here. Why?" she asked. "To ask for my sympathy? My help? To apologize." He fell to his knees right there in the hotel lobby, in front of half of Seoul's elite. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a champagne glass. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Soo-Yeon, I spent 13 years blaming you for something that was never your fault. The doctors told me last month. They did more tests, and it turns out—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. She understood. The infertility hadn't been her fault. It had been his. All along. 13 years of blame. 13 years of shame. 13 years of believing there was something fundamentally broken inside her. And it had all been a lie. Soo-Yeon looked down at the man who had once held her entire heart in his hands. The man who had systematically destroyed her self-worth over 13 years. The man who had thrown her away for a younger woman, and then discovered that everything he had built was built on lies. "Get up," she said quietly. He looked up at her with hope in his eyes. "I'm not going to make a scene," she continued. "I'm not going to humiliate you in front of these people even though you deserve it. But I want you to understand something. Park Tae-hyun." She knelt down so they were eye to eye. "You didn't break me. You tried. For 13 years. You tried to make me believe I was less than nothing. But I survived. I thrived. And now, while your world is falling apart, I'm standing at the top of mine. I know. His voice was barely a whisper. I know. And I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything. She stood back up. Go home, Tae-hyun. Or go to your lawyers. I don't care which. But you're not welcome here. You lost the right to be part of my life the moment you decided I wasn't worth keeping. She turned and walked away, leaving him kneeling on the marble floor behind her. The crowd parted for her as she returned to the party. No one said a word, but she could feel their respect, their admiration, following her like a wave. Junho was waiting for her at the edge of the room. Are you all right? I'm better than all right. She took his hand and squeezed it. I'm free. The news of Park Tae-hyun's downfall broke 3 days later. Fraud, embezzlement, collusion. The charges went on for pages. His company collapsed overnight. His former mistress, Han Ji-soo, was arrested for her role in the scheme. And Tae-hyun himself was left with nothing. No money, no reputation, no future. Some people said it was karma. Others said it was justice. Soo-Yeon said nothing at all. She didn't need to. Instead, she focused on building. Zenith Fashion expanded into international markets. Her sustainable designs won awards across Asia and Europe. And 6 months after the launch party, on a quiet evening on that same rooftop terrace where they had first acknowledged their feelings, Han Junho got down on one knee and asked her to spend the rest of her life with him. She said yes. The wedding was held in the spring, in a garden full of cherry blossoms. Soo-Yeon wore a gown of her own design, cream silk and recycled lace, and walked down the aisle toward a man who had never once made her feel small. And then, at the reception, came the announcement that changed everything. We're going to be parents. The eruption of cheers drowned out whatever Soo-Yeon might have said. She stood there in shock, her hand flying to her stomach, while Junho held her close. You were never barren, he whispered against her hair. You were just waiting for the right time, the right person, the right life. 1 year later, Soo-Yeon stood in the nursery of her new home, holding her daughter Ha-yoon in her arms. She heard footsteps behind her and smiled as Junho appeared, holding a newspaper with the headline, Park Tae-hyun, sentenced to 12 years. Does this bring you closure? He asked. I don't need closure from him, she said. I got my closure the day I signed those divorce papers. She looked down at her daughter, this miracle, this proof that everything the world had told her was a lie. She thought about the girl who had been thrown away, blamed for 13 years, for something that was never her fault. That girl had become a woman who could never be discarded again. And that was the truest victory of all.